And what they found, first of all, that was really interesting was, number one, most people avoided walking into the tree because the tree was right in their path. So most people walked around the tree and didn't run into it. Very few ran into it. But then the second thing that happened is they would stop the person down the sidewalk and say, "Hey, what just happened back there?" And they would say, the person would say, "What are you talking about? What do you mean? Like, do you remember that thing that was in your way that you just moved around?" And most people had no recollection of even physically moving around the tree to keep from running into it. And then the next thing that they noticed when they asked people is, what was on that tree back there? And very few people could say that they saw anything at all on the tree. Even though there was a tree with literal money on it, people didn't see it. And so what these researchers were trying to capture was something similar to our internal autopilot. And so what they're concluding is that when we're walking around much of the time, our body is just on autopilot. We're walking from place to place because our body remembers how to walk from place to place. But we're not necessarily noticing the things that are around us. And you probably have experienced this. Well, everyone's experienced this, like your breathing is a sort of form of autopilot. You don't have to think about it to do it. It sort of happens. Or maybe you've been driving in a car and you've gotten somewhere, I know I've done this, and you don't really remember anything about the trip or how you got there, but you know that you must have been in the car and you must have driven from point A to point B. And so one of the lines in this research was that it seems like people are autopilot zombies, just stumbling through the world without awareness. I mean, person after person would just walk right by a tree filled with money and not even notice what was there. And so our autopilots are a good thing in a certain way. You know, they keep us from having to think critically about every single step we take or every push of the accelerator or turn of the steering wheel. But our autopilot has serious limitations as well. You know, they found that people that were engaged in some other activity while they were walking, like talking or texting on their cell phone, were much slower to respond to the branch. They almost got up on it before their autopilot kicked in and they moved around it. And you've probably noticed that when you're driving in a car. Not that any of us would ever be distracted when we're driving, but maybe you weren't quite paying full attention and you were still driving, but then you almost ran up on someone, or some light on your car starts blinking and telling you you're supposed to do something different. And that same thing happened when the people were walking on the sidewalk and they moved around this branch and didn't run into it, but didn't notice what was actually on it. And, you know, I was thinking about this because this concept of the autopilot can happen to us in our Christian lives as well. I mean, Jeff, if you were here last week or joined us last week online, Jeff asked us to consider how many times we have come to the Lord to receive something in Sunday morning, in a Bible study, in a small group, in just opening the Bible ourselves. And most of us came to a number that's probably thousands of times over the course of many years. And I wonder, how many times did we come on sort of an autopilot? You know, we all made it here today, Sunday morning, so we came and that's good. But part of why we came was because it's programmed into us. It's Sunday morning at 11 a.m. This is where I'm supposed to be. And this is where people expect me to be. Or I open my Bible because that's what you're supposed to do. But maybe I'm not fully present or fully there. And I thought this really came to home. Jeff said after the message last week, someone asked him, what has the Lord been speaking to you recently? When you think about if someone asks you that question, and your response to them is, well, I was in church 3 out of 4 times this last month, and I attended all of my small group meetings, and I read 12 chapters of the Bible. Those are all good things, but it's not really answering the question, what has the Lord been speaking to you recently? And I know for me as well, it can feel like I'm doing these things because I know I'm supposed to, and I know they're good, but it's so easy to be doing it while something else is going on. You know, I've got my Bible open on my phone, and I'm reading my chapter for the day, but I'm also brushing my teeth, and I'm also on my way to the kitchen to get cereal for the kids. And so I get done, and I get my check mark for the day, but I'm not sure what's really happened other than I got my check mark for the day. And what could be happening when we do this is that we could be missing things like money on a tree right in front of us. And the longer that we allow ourselves to get into that default setting, the more it may become normal for us. And the more we just expect that that's our default setting and we don't even notice what's going on spiritually. We could end up in that twilight area that we've been talking about in our other series, or like the church we talked about last week in Sardis, who looked alive. They were doing Christian type things, but they were actually dead inside. But what I want to talk about today is how Jesus shows us that there is something that is worth seeing when we come to him. And in fact, we will witness the mighty works of God when we accept the invitation to come and see Jesus. So I want to take you to the book of John, the Gospel of John. We're going to start in the first chapter of the Gospel of John. We're going to project the slides up here. You're welcome to open your Bibles and follow along with us if you'd like. And so this is the very beginning of Jesus' ministry. Very beginning of Jesus' ministry, chapter 1 of John. And Jesus is in the process of gathering up his disciples. And in the part right before what we're going to read, he's just got his first 2 or 3 disciples. And now we're going to join him in verse 43 of John chapter 1. And what he says here is that the next day, that's after he called his first couple disciples, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. And he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. And Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses and the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And so what we see going on here is that Jesus called Philip simply, "Follow me." But in that calling, Philip saw something that was worth following. And he saw something that made him want to go tell someone else about it. He's immediately going, I've got to go find my friend Nathanael and tell him what I just saw. And so Philip found Nathanael and said, "We found him. We have found him." So apparently Nathanael and Philip were seekers, people interested in the higher things, interested in going deeper. And he said to Nathanael, "Hey, we found him. We found him of whom Moses and the law and the prophets wrote." And I kind of feel like Nathanael was probably getting excited. He said, "Oh my gosh, you found him? You found what we've been looking for? Tell me more about it." And then Philip says, "Yes, and it's Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael just deflates. And he says, "Oh." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" His hopes were dashed in that. Jesus of Nazareth, sorry Philip, that can't be the answer. And I wonder if Nathanael had an autopilot default in setting it some sort of way. He was expecting the Messiah to look a certain way or be from a certain place, or maybe just be some sort of thought out there that someday, somehow it might come to fruition, but not expecting that it would be something that I would see right there in front of me. You know, I think about how this might work, and I was thinking about trying to describe to you the best restaurant that I've ever been to, and I was thinking I could tell you about how wonderful the food was, which of course is the top priority for me. How wonderful the food was, and how great the ambiance was, and the experience, and the wait staff, and it was just all so magnificent. And you might be starting to get a little bit excited, and you're thinking, "Oh, I can't wait to hear about this place." And then I tell you, yes, it was the best meal I've ever had, and it was in Albany, New York, and it was at the Hampton Inn. And I'm being serious, but you're laughing because you're thinking, can anything good come from the Hampton Inn in Albany, New York? But it was truly the best experience I've ever had at a restaurant. And I could spend minutes or hours trying to convince you and talk you into why this meal was so good. But ultimately, the best thing that I could do is ask you to come and experience it yourself. And that's what Philip says here to Nathanael when he says, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Philip says to him, "Come and see." And that's what I want to invite us into today, to come and see. And if you think about coming, everyone that's sitting here right now, that's watching online, you've already got the first part. You came today. You're here. You regularly and faithfully come. And so the first part, we're pretty good at that. But the part that sometimes is a challenge for us is in this see. So I don't just come, but I come in a certain way, with a certain mindset, with open eyes. I've got a hold of the steering wheel. I'm off of autopilot. I'm going to come to observe and evaluate, to look deeper, to look with a sense of expectation and anticipation. Because what we will see is that Jesus tells us that if you come and see in that way, that you will see something. And so that's what we start to see in verse 47. Where so Nathanael decided, all right, I'm going to go. I'll come and see with you, Philip. So Jesus saw Nathanael coming, so he's on his way over to meet Jesus. And Jesus said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." And Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" So somehow Jesus knows Nathanael. And what he said about him was apparently true, because Nathanael doesn't argue with him. Apparently Nathanael was an Israelite in whom there was no deceit. So Jesus somehow understood his character, his manner of his character. And so Nathanael said, "Well, how do you know me?" Because they'd never met before. And Jesus said to him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." So before Nathanael even knew who Jesus was, before he knew he was going to come over and meet him, Jesus says, "You were sitting under a fig tree, and I saw you there." And then Nathanael says, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Kind of a curious response. I saw you under a fig tree? Wow, you are the King of Israel? It's interesting. It makes you wonder, what was Nathanael doing under that fig tree? What did Jesus see? And the best and most frustrating part about this is that nobody knows. It wasn't recorded. People have conjectures and guesses, but they're just that. Whatever was going on under that fig tree was something that only Nathanael and Jesus know. But it was so intimate and private and personal to Nathanael that only the Son of God, the King of Israel, could have known it. And so one of the reasons that we come and see is because Jesus has already seen us. He already knows us. He knows our thoughts, our doubts, our struggles. He knows everything about us. And we may get something that is just for us, so personal that it can only be given to us, just like Nathanael got here. And then Jesus says to him in a certain way, "But wait," if that impressed you, "but wait, there's more." And in verse 50 he says, Jesus answered him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." It's like Jesus says here, that's all it took, as impressive as it was that I know you and everything about you. You haven't seen anything yet, what I want to show you. Because this thing that I'm talking about here is huge. It is heaven opened. It is angels of God ascending and descending. This is a reference here. Jesus is making a reference to the story in the Old Testament about Jacob's ladder, where Jacob laid down and he had a dream that there was a ladder and its foot was on earth and it reached all the way up into heaven, and the angels of God were moving up and down on it. And Jesus is saying here, the angels of God will be ascending and descending on the Son of Man, that is Jesus himself. Jesus is that ladder. He's saying, I am the truth, the way. I am the way, the truth, the life. I am that ladder from the beginning to the middle to the end. And the heavenly traffic is flowing up and down through me. And when you look upon me and see what I have to show you, you will see salvation and redemption, resurrection, glory beyond comprehension. And that's what he wants to show us. And I really got stuck in these verses. This 5 loaves and 2 fishes series is all about things that have been food to the speaker, and a hope that sharing that will make it be food for the rest of the congregation. And I really got stuck in these verses because I felt like I had been doing all the regular coming. I'd been coming to all the church services and the Bible studies and even reading my Bible. But I felt like I was on autopilot in a certain way. I hadn't been doing a lot of seeing. And I kind of related to that zombie feeling that they say you're driving, but you're not really paying attention to what you're doing. And so I decided that I needed to grab a hold of the wheel and get off of autopilot and be a little bit more intentional. And so I grabbed my notebook. Sorry, I'm trying to let you pick it up. Grabbed my notebook, and I wrote down, this was a couple months ago, I wrote down day 1. Come and see. And I just considered, what does that look like to come and see Jesus? And by the time I had written down day 2, I was starting to see a little something. That day, Psalm 19:7 came across. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. And I felt like, yes, that is what I want to see, revival. That's what I need. And then by day 3, you remember last week what Jeff told us that you'll get if you hear and receive from Jesus, you'll get marching orders? I felt like I started to get some marching orders. Actually, I already had the marching orders. They were in the pocket of my jeans that I put up in the closet for the winter. And Jesus was telling me, remember those, you need to get those down. There's someone that you were supposed to call, that you haven't done it yet, and you need to do it. So I got my marching orders back down and opened them up. And by the end of week 1, somewhere around day 7, this verse had kept coming up. He is good. His steadfast love endures forever. And I just was struck by the permanence of that. His love endures forever. It is steadfast. It feels like the opposite of me. I'm wavering and withering, but he endures forever. And he is good, so I can trust him. And in that second week, day 10, 11, 12, I really started to see some things that Jesus wanted to show me about how I interacted with my family, with my neighbors, people that I regularly come into contact with. And then, day 21, 22, 23, somewhere in that 3rd week, I was reading in the book of Chronicles, which is one of those books that, it's history, there's a lot of facts and figures, and you can just kind of breeze through it. But I really remember being struck by how God's people would repeatedly turn away from him and not follow him and disobey, but then they would make a change and repent and turn back. And whenever they did that, he would forgive them and welcome them back. And I started to see some conviction. I told you I had been coming to all the regular stuff that a Christian comes to, but I realized my coming was actually kind of sloppy. I wasn't really as prepared as I should have been. I was there, but not necessarily present. And so through this, toward the end of the first month, I just started to see this whole reorientation. We see a lot of things. Our eyes are always on when we're awake, and we see a lot of things. And I had been seeing a lot of things that were not Christ, and I needed to reorient my line of vision. And during this whole time, I don't think it was necessarily coincidental that 2 of the other messages in the 5 loaves and 2 fishes series were on a very similar topic. About a month ago, Matt encouraged us to remove the callousness that had built up in our hearts and to come back to Jesus and renew our hearts with that truth that is in his word. And just last week, Jeff told us to wake up. He said, wake up, hear, and receive, and do. And so through all this time, I felt like I was just sort of scratching the surface of what Jesus wants to show me if you just come and see. And so the question we have to ask is, what is it that you are expecting when you come to the Lord? Now, I think it's easy to come to the Lord and expect to see help with the current crisis that is going on in my life, or help fill some need or want that feels so immediate to me, or come to see the way to a better life, or some good morals that I can teach my kids, to come and see some thing off in the distance where I die and go to heaven and float on a cloud, or to come to Jesus and not really expect anything at all. Because what may be happening is not that we are expecting too much, but that we expect too little. We don't think that Jesus can show us as much as he's willing and ready to. You know, if you think about it, Jesus has the answers to show us for anything that we are looking to see. You know, if you were thinking, I'd like some illumination in my life, I'd like to see things different, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. If you're thinking, I'd like some reconciliation, I'd like to see some forgiveness, see some redemption, Jesus says, by my death and resurrection, I have reconciled all who believe in me and my work to God. If you're thinking, I'd like to see something different in my life, some permanence, Jesus says, believe in me, and though you die, you shall live. Or if you're looking to see some fulfillment, some meaning, Jesus says, I came that they may have life and have it abundant. Whatever it is we're looking for, Jesus can show us something better. Because what he's saying in these verses is that you are connected to a heavenly ladder when you're connected to Jesus. And there are angels of God ascending and descending on it. And that wherever Christ is, that ladder is. And there's heavenly traffic flowing. And the beautiful part about that is that Christ is in us for all who have believed in him. So that wherever we are, Christ is there. And that means that we have that ladder. And he's saying, come and see it. Let me open up heaven itself to you. And I can reorient your perspective and help you see something greater than anything else that's going on in your life. And so that's really my encouragement for us today, that we will be those that come and see what Jesus is doing. You know, thinking back to that experiment with the money tree that people just walk right by, the researchers concluded that there were two surprising findings that they weren't expecting. One is that they weren't expecting that people would walk right by a tree filled with money and not even notice. They just walk right by it. But even more interesting to me was number two, that people would look at the money tree, but somehow they weren't able to see the money. And people would walk right by, and they would stare right at it, but somehow they just kept right on walking. That their brain didn't process it because their brain was off doing something else. And so what I don't want us to do is to allow our autopilot to miss out on the treasures that are right in front of us to see in Christ. And so a couple ways that I think we can help with this is really in how we come before the Lord and how we see. And one is to be expectant. And when I come to Jesus, I should expect that I'm going to see something, because there is something there that he wants to show me. And number two is to be intentional. You know, there are, like I mentioned, there are lots of things that fight for our line of sight. And sometimes we got to push those things out of the way. We got to fight for that little bit of quiet time, for that little bit of focus time, to allow us an opportunity to see. And we also have to be resilient. I can't stand up here and tell you that I have a notebook filled from day 1 through whatever, 57, that's got some brilliant insight in it every single day. There were some days I felt like I didn't see much at all. Some days I felt like I unsaw some stuff, like I went backwards. But even in that discouragement, there is something to see there. There's a path that Jesus wants to show us. So to be resilient, and you know, there are days there you might not see much, but then there are days you'll see so much that it really keeps you going. And then lastly, and very practically, and this is just something that worked for me, and I know a lot of people do this, but I wrote down some things in my notebook. And it's not like an extensive journal of all my thoughts, but I just wrote down day one, what did I see today? Because if you're like me, there's 1,000 things going through your brain at any point in time. And I might see something and I might have forgotten it 30 seconds later. So I tried to capture some things so that I could build on them and I could really think about what are the patterns and things that Jesus is trying to show me that I can build on, So the notebook would really help me with that as well. So that's my prayer for you. I'll stop and pray here that we will all be those that come to Jesus and see what he is doing. Lord, I thank you that you are a God that works actively, that you are a God that reveals, that you are a God that has things to show us. And I pray that you will open our eyes and open our hearts and teach us, Lord. Show us your path, show us your way. Show us things that are beyond our comprehension and imagination. Show us, Lord, that heavenly ladder, the angels ascending and descending. Lord, we want to see those greater and greater things. We pray in your name. Amen.